When the boss fired him in front of the entire office, Mark didn't argue. He simply stood up and left. But you won't believe what he did when he came back. I arrived at the office 20 minutes before the workday started. Not because I was eager to show my zeal. No, I just couldn't stay at home. 15 years in the company, and here was a new chapter. Not in my life, of course, but in the life of our department. We've got a new director, which means a hurricane of corporate reform, peppered with buzzwords and dead eyes, is about to sweep through the office. I'm no saint, but I knew this business inside and out. I remembered how we shrank to 6 people in times of crisis, how I personally carried 3 clients on my back when everyone else hid behind the phrase, "It's out of my area of responsibility." And now, apparently my zone is over. The new director, Ms. Clarissa Howell, appeared as if she'd been cut out of a people management magazine. A stern suit, a predatory squint, a smile without warmth. She entered the meeting room like a queen returning to the throne after exile. Only we weren't her subjects, and the throne was my desk chair. "From this day forward, we are working in a new way," she said in a voice that made the coffee in my thermos lose its flavor. "The structure is being revised. Methods are being updated. And, of course, approaches to working with key clients will be redistributed." No one understood anything, but everyone nodded. I sat in the corner looking at the team I'd trained, developed, covered for when they screwed up. No one even glanced in my direction. Only one trainee cast a quick, guilty glance. It was as if the rest of us had already sensed who the new favorite was. I didn't interrupt. I sat and listened to how my work, my projects, my strategies were being shared by people who 2 months ago didn't know the name of our key client. I tried to ask a question and got the same thing in return. "We don't discuss the past, Mark. We're creating a new one. I hope you adapt. If not, you know the way. You know, getting fired is one thing. But when you get slapped in front of everyone and left sitting there, that's acting. That's a play." And I had to finish it. To the end. The next day, the real sweep began. Unofficially, of course. They didn't call me in, write me letters. It was more subtle than that. First, my access to the analytics system disappeared. Then my corporate presentation folder. And in the evening, HR mistakenly sent me a termination letter, which was withdrawn a minute later with the wording, "technical failure." Funny, isn't it? 15 years, and you become a glitchy variable in their system. And the cherry on the cake was that my project, which I'd been working on for 2 quarters, went to Sasha. Yes, the same Sasha who I taught to know where the real numbers were in the reports and where the client's bluff was. He couldn't even look me in the eye when they announced him as the new person in charge. Just shrugged. "Mark? They just told me to take it." I couldn't refuse. Of course you couldn't. Except I remembered how 2 weeks ago he couldn't close an Excel spreadsheet without panicking. Now he's a corporate favorite. When I went into the conference room to at least pick up my papers, Clarissa was standing at the whiteboard. She was erasing something. She didn't even turn around. "Mark, we'll talk later. We have prep for Friday." A presentation for Carradine Tech, the company's oldest client. My client. My system. My approach. They've been with us for 10 years simply because they trusted one person. But apparently, in the new reality, trust is not an asset, but a weakness. As I sat in my car this evening, my name in corporate Slack became invisible. No mention of it. It was as if I had been cut out. No pain. No explanation. Like a bug on a website. And that's when I realized, I'm not just being pushed out. I was being erased. Wednesday started as usual, coffee, elevator, key card. Except my card wasn't working anymore. The security guard at the front desk grinned like it was a joke. "Try it again, Mr. Randolph," he said, and held out his own. It didn't work either. I was let in on the call. No comment. I walked past my coworkers. Not one said a word. As if my status was now on the level of office ghost. You are there, but no one should see you. Sasha sat in my seat. Didn't even try to move. My old chair, my monitor, even my mug was now his. He saw me, embarrassed, stood up, started to say something. I raised my hand. "Don't explain. I understood everything." Then I walked into Clarissa's office. Without knocking. She was talking to someone on the buzzer, nodded for me to wait. I didn't sit down. What's going on? I asked when she was done. Mark, she began with the same icy courtesy. As I was saying, we're rebuilding the department. We're grateful for your years of service. But that doesn't give you immunity. I don't have to explain every personnel decision. So you fired me without officially firing me. You erased me without calling me names. I sympathize with you, she said. But the company is looking forward. Do you have any idea who you're losing? Losing? She chuckled. Or getting rid of? I didn't come out right away. I stood at the door like an old dog that had been kicked off the veranda. Not because he'd been badly served, but because he was a reminder that an old house doesn't last forever. Friday was approaching. I knew there would be a presentation. I knew who would lead it. And I knew how it would end. But for now, I just went out. Outside. Alone. Under the gray sky. And walked home. Not fired. Not existing. Just crossed off. What happened next changed everything. Subscribe and stay, you don't want to miss how it unfolded. Presentation day. I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at my face and thinking, should I go there? No, not to the presentation, to the office, where you are no one else. Where your work is someone else's credit, your reputation is nothing, and your name is no longer printed in any newsletter. But you know what? I put the shirt on anyway. The blue one with the stitched elbow. The customers remembered it. Stuart remembered it. He always said, when you're wearing that shirt, I trust you. Well, I didn't wear it for the office. I wore it for me. I got into the building at 9:28. The presentation was at 10 o'clock. The pass didn't work. But this time, I didn't explain anything. I just looked the guard in the eye. He mumbled something but pressed the button. The doors opened. As I stepped onto the floor, it was as if I'd been cut out of the air with a knife. The whole team froze. Clarissa sat at the head of the table as if it were her throne. Sasha was thrashing around at the board, trying to memorize the order of the slides. There were dark circles under his arms. I knew that sweat. The sweat of a beginner who isn't ready. The sweat of a man who doesn't realize he's about to pour over something he hasn't even had time to read all the way through. No one called me out. But I stayed. Sat in the corner. Like a shadow. Or like a predator. And waited. At 9:58, Stuart French came in. Tall, gray-haired, with the kind of attentive expression that makes a youngster's knees shake. He looked around at everyone. Where's Mark? He asked. Straight. No curtsy. Clarissa didn't blink. He's no longer on the project. We've reassigned the roles. Sasha will present the concept. Sasha turned pale. I could see his hand trembling on the projector remote. He clicked, and the first slide didn't load. A technical glitch. But it wasn't technical. Thank you for taking the time. He began. His voice traitorously broke off. He coughed. He tried again. Today we want to present an updated partnership strategy. After 5 minutes, it was clear he didn't know what he was talking about. He was mixing up names. He gave the wrong dates. He inserted slides that were part of last year's presentation, but didn't realize the client had discarded them themselves. Clarissa tried to intervene, but it was too late. Stuart raised his hand. Stop. The silence hit like a rubber bullet. Even the fan on the ceiling seemed to subside. This project was built on trust. In a man who knew us. Who worked with us before you had email. Where is he? Clarissa started, but I was already up. I didn't mean to, but my feet did. I was drawn to the voice like metal to a magnet. And then Stuart looked right at me. Mark, you're here. Talk to me. That's it. The point of no return. I stepped up to the table. No slides. No notes. Just started talking. When we started working with you, I said, your company was moving from B2B to the private segment. You asked for transparency, reliability, a human approach. Not AI, not templates. Real solutions. That's why you stayed. Because we didn't sell you air. We dug in. And I did. About the first campaigns. About the very glitches that we spent nights bypassing. About your letter from 2018, remember it? Where you called us the only team you can blindly trust. I saw Stuart nod. as his colleague, the one who's always silent, suddenly pulled out a notepad. Clarissa tried to intervene. It's not an approved presentation. But no one was listening to her anymore. Everything she was building collapsed under the weight of my memory. Because no slide can replace someone who actually pulled clients out of the swamp when they were forgotten. When I finished, Stuart said simply, "We don't need your new structure. We're working with Mark. Or not working at all." And then he stood up. And his whole team with him. They didn't leave. They just stepped up to the call. It was pressure. A signal. Think before you say, "We're handing the project over to a young professional." Clarissa sat in a stupor. Sasha was as white as a wall. For me, I just sat back down. In my corner. It wasn't a comeback. It was a shot. At the hypocrisy. Silence. On a system where experience is a hindrance and principle is a weakness. After the meeting, the room emptied. The clients left, leaving behind a silence that was louder in the ears than any shouting. Clarissa sat with her fingers interlocked. Her forehead cracked as if she had 1,000 scenarios in her head, none of which had worked. "You overstepped your authority," she finally said. "And you overestimated yourself," I replied. No anger. No sarcasm. Just the fact. Sasha left first. Didn't say a word. Just nodded. That nod had everything in it. Fear, remorse, and, I think, a drop of respect. Colleagues began to leave one by one. No one looked me in the eye. And yet everyone felt that something had happened. Something that couldn't be swept under the rug. An hour later, the office started hearing rumors. That the client was threatening to terminate. That management had been informed. That HR was preparing an audit. And I was sitting in my office. In the same corner. By the window. With a cup of coffee I poured myself, just like old times. I didn't know if I'd be officially back. I didn't know if I'd be reinstated. I didn't care. Because I was already back. In the minds of those who wanted to forget me. In the minds of the client who knows who kept him afloat. In my own confidence, which has been returned to me, not papers, not regalia, but a voice. A voice that can't be turned off. One that doesn't depend on position. I didn't win. But I was myself again. By the evening of that day, I received a letter. Unofficial. From the personal email of one of the regional office managers. "Mark, today you did something we all didn't have the balls to do. We'll be in touch." It's funny, isn't it? When you're alone in your office and there are whispers, facial expressions, pauses outside the door, and suddenly someone says, "You were right." But in a whisper. No signature. No flag. I didn't accuse. They're scared too. We're all products of the same machine. Some cling to the chair. Some cling to silence. I've been silent too long to judge them. In the restroom, I bumped into Victoria, our financial one. She quickly lowered her eyes, then suddenly looked up and said, "I was wrong. You always kept the balance. And I was afraid the old staff would drag us down. But you alone have held what we are now losing." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. But inside, it turned over. By the end of the day, Clarissa was gone. They said it was a meeting. Someone said she'd been called to the head office. And someone whispered that this could be the end. Not for me. For her. I wasn't happy. Tired of rejoicing and tired of being tired. I just sat at my old desk again. And you know what? He still remembered the shape of my elbows. And in that second, I realized that even if there was a war coming, I'd already won the main thing. My voice. The right to stand up and speak even when everyone else wants you to be silent. Already approaching the parking lot, I heard footsteps. I turned around, Sasha. He silently approached, stopped a step away from me. Didn't hold the phone, didn't look away. He just stood there as if preparing for confession. "I blew it," he said quietly. "You were right. I thought it was a chance. I turned out to be a puppet." Sir Mark. I looked at him. I saw myself, years ago, standing in front of a retired veteran who'd been passed over. I didn't know what it was like then. Now I know all too well. This isn't about forgiveness, Sasha. It's about choice. You make it right if you want to. Not for me to say. To yourself. He nodded. Turned around. He walked away. I stayed. For a couple more minutes. Just to capture the moment. The silence. The meaning. Because sometimes, when you're standing alone in a parking lot after a long day, you realize your strongest voice is in that very moment. Without a microphone. Without a presentation. Just because you're left standing. And that is enough. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. Monday started with rain. You know, nasty, slanting rain, as if it wasn't the sky crying, but the system itself spitting in your face for having survived. I didn't come to the office with a pass. The guards already knew who I was. And for the first time, there was no pity in their gaze. It was something else. Something closer to respect. I went up to the floor. My name reappeared on the sign by the desk. No announcement, no applause. Just silently hung. And you know, that was even better. Because now it's not out of politeness. It's because there was no choice. Clarissa didn't show up. No one mentioned her at the meeting. It's like she disappeared. No rumors, no letter, no explanation. Just a shadow in the air, like a person who had been tried to fit into the system, but she'd spit him out. Sasha sat across from him. All in his work. Silently. No attempt to make amends, no unnecessary gestures. But every time I looked up, he was already looking. As if waiting for a sign. Or a judgment. Or maybe a lesson. I gave none. And that was only fair. Because if you've been through zero yourself, don't rush to teach others. Let them burn out. On my lunch break, I went out on the town. Just for a walk. No plans. No schedule. It was only then that I felt my shoulders release. It was as if all this time I had been carrying not the weight of the office, but my own name, mangled, stained, and only now cleansed. I walked the streets and thought, what's next? I hadn't been fired, or elevated to hero status, or given a new position. It's a strange state, when you're part of something again, but not by force, but by fact. Because you stayed when others burned out. A bus passed by with an advertisement for some online school. On the side was the phrase, "Your new career starts today." I chuckled. My new career began when I was thrown off the record and without a word. When I stood up and spoke up because no one else was going to. Back at the office, I saw a letter from HR, formal, with signatures. You have been reinstated. Thank you for your understanding. Look forward to continued cooperation. The letter was written as if I'd terminated the contract. Like everything that happened was a misunderstanding. But you know, I didn't delete it. I forwarded it to my personal email. Not for proof. For the memory. So that later, on a difficult day, I could open it up and remind myself, even if they try to wipe you clean, you can come back. If you know who you are. In the afternoon, I got a call from the main office. Mark, can you be in New York on Friday? We need someone to show the Carradine Tech case in front of the board of supervisors. I almost laughed. But instead I just said, I will. In the evening, I stayed late in the office. Some people were leaving, others were just putting away their laptops. And then I was approached by someone I wasn't expecting to see, Alex from the legal department. Mark, can I talk to you for a minute? He was the kind of guy who always kept a low profile. He didn't talk much, but he wrote clearly. He sat across from me and folded his hands on the desk. I wanted you to know. When all this started, I saw Clarissa pushing. But I kept quiet. We all kept quiet. We thought if we kept our heads down, we'd be safe. But you came out. And if it wasn't for you, we'd still be chewing on paper truth. Thank you for that. I nodded. I had nothing to say. His words were more important than any apology. Because he recognized, not just my pain, but my fear. When he left, I felt a chill run down my spine. Strangely, it's recognizing another person's fear that heals your own. The next day, I started gathering materials. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I knew this presentation wouldn't be for a checkmark. It would be my footprint, clear as a palm print on concrete. I prepared everything from draft strategies to old case studies. Each one had more than just experience. They had style. My handwriting. My way of deciding. My way of hearing the client before they speak. On Friday, I was in New York City. In a building where the glass looked more expensive than our entire operating profit for the quarter. I walked into a meeting room where every chair cost as much as my old laptop. But I didn't feel out of place. On the contrary, for the first time in a long time, felt like I had come to where I belonged. There were 7 people sitting in front of me. People in jackets that you could safely lie on the lawn in without getting dirty. But I looked them calmly in the eye. Because I had something to say. I turned on the slides. But I didn't read from them. I told them. How we took a client out of an unprofitable segment. How we built personalized communications. How we listened even when it seemed like there was nothing to listen to. And how we didn't sell trust for KPIs. In the 5th minute, one of the women at the center of the board leaned back, crossed her arms and smiled. You know, not that corporate smile, but a real smile. The smile, we get it. The idea has passed. When it was over, they shook my hands. Some with restraint, some with pressure. And one of the senior partners said, "You didn't just save the project. You reminded me that business is not an Excel file. It's people." After that, silence. A long silence. But not oppressive. Like after a good song, when you don't want to applaud too quickly. On my way out, I didn't go straight to the elevator. I stopped at the window, looked down at the streets, and realized I hadn't just recovered. I had come back on my own terms. I came home late at night, on the train, in that same old shirt, as a symbol of stubbornness and memory. I looked out the window and thought, is it really over? It wasn't over. It started all over again. Only now without fear. No hope that anyone would stand up for me. Now I knew that if it wasn't you, it was nobody. This weekend I slept for the first time in a long time. No anxiety. No feeling that something was falling apart behind you. It was the most ordinary sleep I've ever had. And it was healing. Monday, I wasn't the first one into the office. But when I walked in, a lot of people turned around. Not like they had before, in suspense. It was like they were checking to see if it was him. It was him. He came back. He stayed. I went to my desk. There was a note on it. No signature. You've shown us how to talk. Now it's our turn. I sat down, inhaled, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not a report, not a plan, but a letter to myself. So I wouldn't forget what it was like. Because if you don't record the truth, someone will rewrite it. So I wrote. No commas, no plans for glory. I just wrote to keep it. So that someday, someone maybe tired, forgotten, burned out by the system, would read it and realize, you are not alone. And if you stand your ground, even when everything is against you, you haven't lost. That same day I saw Sasha talking to a new trainee. He spoke confidently, but without posturing. He was showing him a report and explaining why it was important to listen to the client, not just repeat the script. I stopped in the aisle. Didn't intervene. Just watched. And I realized something had changed in him. Not instantly, not under pressure. But because he, like me, realized that silence could not save anything. Later, he came up to me at the coffee machine. "Are you angry?" he asked. I shrugged my shoulders. "Not anymore." He looked at the floor, then back at me. "I want to learn. For real. Not to impress anyone, but to be worth something." And that's when I finally said what had been brewing in my chest for a long time. Then forget who you were and start with who you are. And don't lie to yourself. Even if the system demands it. He nodded. And walked away. Not like a defeated man. Like a man who'd been given a chance to get out of his own shadow. That evening, I was alone in the office. For the last time. Not because I had to. But because I wanted to. I turned out the lights. I walked around the floor. And I realized I'm not part of this furniture anymore. I'm a footprint. I'm an example. I'm the man who stood up when others sat down. And if tomorrow everything falls apart again, I'll still know. I was there. I spoke. I stayed.